Welcome to Alienating the Audience, where we don't just appreciate science fiction, we taste it and roll around in it, the same way beagles do when they find a dead fish. That's how much we love sci-fi. I'm Andrew Heaton, the thinking man's nerd. This week, we're going to go meta and technical and talk with Dr. Erin Macdonald about what science fiction keeps getting wrong, physics blunders, and the astonishing amount of biologically unnecessary nipples. We get into all of that. Plus, some helpful tips on how to induce artificial gravity on your rocket and or space blimp. Afterwards, fellow comedian Nick Sperduti comes on the show to talk about our recent and mostly horrible trip to the planet Coruscant. Put on your visor, and let's go! My guest today is Dr. Erin Macdonald. She is a science fiction consultant. This is to say, Dr. Erin is a scientist who helps Hollywood be more scientifically accurate. I'm delighted to have you on the program.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
And we were just talking. How do you, when you introduce yourself in L.A., when they say, what do you do for a living? What do you tell them?
I don't have an answer that takes less than 30 seconds.
I tell people I'm professionally clever.
That works.
That's what I go with, and then they just kind of they know that they're like, I don't want to unpack that.
Right.
I don't want to know what he means by that. You're a scientist.
Correct.
But you live in L.A., and when you get your PhD in Glasgow,
Yep.
You did your postdoc in Cardiff, and then you had like an epiphanal moment, and you went, no, I'm going to be a starlet. I'm going out to Hollywood. Like, is that what happened?
Yeah, so while I was in Cardiff, I started giving talks at sci-fi conventions where I was teaching at the time, and I saw how powerful it was to use science fiction to teach, where you have a class that's totally dozing off, and then you say, oh, that exoplanet we're learning about, that's like Tatooine from Star Wars. The whole room pops up. So I started using science fiction to teach science, started going to conventions, and just have a huge passion for that. I never wanted to be a professor necessarily, so that just kind of took me down that path.
One of the things that's been thrilling over the course of my lifetime is that nerds have won.
Yeah.
So I was born in '84. I think you're younger than me, but in the '80s,
barely.
There were all these movies where like the nerds would fight the jocks, and then like in a lot of movies, even in the '90s, they're like, oh, we have to get on something called the internet. Let's go find a virgin, and they go to the library and find some guy with like bottle cap glasses and stuff.
Yep.
And now I'll talk to people, and they're like, well, I'm kind of a bread nerd. I love bread, and I'm like, I don't think you're using the term nerd correctly. Like,
I don't think that means what you think it means.
I have spent so much time at Star Trek conventions. Like, I am ethnically nerd. That's what I put on federal forms. Is I'm a nerd, whereas like you watched Lost. But I welcome this development. I like that nerds are now like the ascendant class. It's really cool. So then I'm fascinated. I want to talk to you because I know sci-fi pretty well. I don't know physics very well. I don't know science terribly well. And you host a program called Dr. Erin Explains the Universe that you can check out on YouTube. And you work as a consultant on all of this stuff. So first off, can you watch a science fiction film without like getting angry and talking to your date and going like, man, that's not how sounds work in space? Like, can you suspend your science and enjoy sci-fi, or are you just constantly irritated?
Well, as a sci-fi fan, I think that's what's helped me get where I am here, because so many scientists, when they try to work with writers, or writers will call their science buddy, their response is just going to be like, it doesn't work that way. Go away and come up with something else. Whereas I want to make it work. I want to make the science as correct as it could be. But there definitely are those moments. And now my partner's so used to it that he's just like, they'll say something in a TV show and he immediately flips to me just to look at my reaction because he knows my brain is going. For the most part, though, I gotta say I do really enjoy sci-fi.
Yeah. Well, and I think like science fiction too, it's also not meant to be, at least I don't think most of the time, it's not meant to be a literal exegesis of how technology works. It's meant to be an exploration of humanity by seeing it from some other vantage point. Like I have to suspend a lot of the time economics. I know economics a lot better. So like I watched Elysium, that Matt Damon film that came out a few years ago, and I was like, whenever you get this many rich people together, Episcopalian churches sprout, and then they create charities. Why aren't there charities here? And I like, but I have to turn that off and go, all right, the point of the film's not about the economics of this. The point of the film is X, Y, and Z. So I'm glad
glad to hear that. So you're able to watch a sci-fi film without getting disturbed by it. That said, what's the most common thing that you have to correct for when somebody hands you a script?
Oh, man. I know it right off the top of my head, and it's the only thing that does actually upset me when I'm watching a sci-fi series.
Is it explosions in space? Is that it?
It's not, because explosions are cool.
Okay. Nice. So you've got, like, if there's a coolness factor, you let that jump up beyond the physics of it. Great.
Exactly. Story over science. We can make some exchanges there, but for me, it's the cosmological address. It's this idea that we are a planet orbiting a star. There are many stars in our galaxy, and our galaxy is one of many galaxies. Yes.
Dozens of galaxies.
Dozens of dozens of dozens of dozens. And our galaxy is one of dozens of dozens of dozens of dozens of dozens in our universe. And so this idea in science fiction where they say, like, oh, we're going to go, they're in another galaxy. Yeah, like your regions of a galaxy are going to have millions and millions, hundreds of millions of stars that you could visit. Space is big, and it's so hard for us to understand and wrap our minds around that, my job day one of Astronomy 101 is to break the students' brains, to just be like, space is really big, and it takes a long time to get anywhere. And that's the one thing, like, science fiction just throws out the window. A lot of us, Star Wars is a good example, right? It takes place in a galaxy far, far away. It's not another star system. They only visit other star systems with planets, but it's within a totally different galaxy, whereas things like Battlestar Galactica, Firefly, they'll all reference, Earth that was or old Earth, and implying that they are visiting star systems within our own Milky Way galaxy. But sometimes they just go so wrong. There was one, because I loved Voltron Legendary Defender, the reboot they did for Netflix. The science in that is so good. The way they talk about faster than light travel, wormholes, everything, space-time, spot on. It's the only time I've ever seen science fiction address time dilation when you're traveling. And then at the end of one of their seasons, they're like, we arrived home to our solar system, the Milky Way. I cried.
Good old Milky Way solar system, the best solar system this side of the Mississippi. Yeah.
I just cried. It's the only thing, and I do end up correcting it a lot. Where they'll throw in universe, galaxy, and star system interchangeably.
Really?
Yeah. And
see, now I feel more erudite and educated than I did when I sat down with you, because I at least know that the Milky Way is our galaxy. Like, right. I at least know that. I feel like I could give directions to an alien somewhat well if they're from a different galaxy, right?
Right, exactly.
Like, we're kind of near Andromeda. Okay, like if you're on the edge of Andromeda, you can see, okay, yeah. Like that, okay. And it makes sense to me as well, that the perspective thing. Like, I think I was in my 20s before I realized that the solar system model is not the nice, clean sort of Frisbee proportionality that we a lot of the time get when you look at textbooks. It's like, well, there's the sun, and then here's all the planets in one line. They're always just like, it's like a record player going around the sun, and that's how zodiacs work.
Right.
And then also, like, if you were a giant, you could throw a baseball from one to the other. And it's like, well, no, actually, they're massive. Like, I don't know the proportionality exactly, but it's like if we were a golf ball, like Mars would be, like 40 football fields away or something like that.
Oh, yeah, proportionally,
it'd be just an insane amount away.
Exactly.
And even like the moon, a lot of the time when we see pictographic representations of the moon, it's like the Earth is like a basketball and the moon's like a softball, and it's like 3 inches away.
Right.
And it's like, well, no, actually, it's way the hell out there. It's why it took it several days to get from the Earth to the moon, even though they're in the super fast space rocket.
Yeah.
Okay, so space and distance are the things. Do you have any tricks to try and like get people to realize the extent of things?
For that, it's mostly talking about the scales. So just how you were talking about, when we say, because a lot of times I have fun trying to scare people with like all the ways that space can kill us.
Yeah, a lot.
You have to end it with.
It's like we're not even designed for it.
Exactly. Who'd have thought, right? But, this idea that there's so much space junk and, there's an asteroid coming close to us. I'm like, that's like there being a baseball on the other end of a football field,
right.
And I'm throwing like a ball bearing to try to hit it. I'm not going to hit it, you know? All of these proportions, there's a great simulation that I try to give people called If the Moon Were a Pixel, and you just start at the sun, and if the moon were 1 pixel on your computer, you travel through so you just hit the right arrow and you start traveling, and you can change your units. It's okay.
Never mind the failure of me to put my phone on. Oh, okay, continue.
No worries. So you hit the right arrow and you start traveling, and you will get bored before you get to Jupiter. Guaranteed. And it's a really good representation of just how big space is.
That's like in every film I've seen where there's an asteroid belt. It's really like a ring of Saturn. A massive ring of Saturn. And they're constantly zigzagging through it, whereas in reality, the asteroid belt is like kind of vague debris in a concentric line, but you may not even be able to see asteroids from other asteroids. It's so vast. So
we don't. I think it's hard to appreciate too how hard asteroids are to see when we talk about space travel or things. People are like, well, an asteroid, passed us a week ago. Why didn't we see that? They're hard. They're dark. They're cold. When we see things in space, it's because stuff is reflecting or it's emitting. And, like Predator. and we can't see. Asteroids are dark and cold, and they're really, really hard to detect. And,
Can I ask you some basic, dumb physics questions?
Bring it on.
My friend and I have been having a debate over whether or not a corpse would rapidly cool in space. So his position is this.
Okay.
He says that if an astronaut were floating in space and they died, that because there is no medium with which to transmit heat, that they would just stay room temperature and body temperature for like weeks. That that doesn't sound right to me. I think that it's even though there's no medium, it's so cold that it would suck all the heat out. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right because we.
You hear that, Dan?
Sorry, Dan.
I said we had this conversation 4.5 years ago. If Dan's listening, he's going to feel bad if I'm
You don't necessarily. Thermodynamics doesn't need a medium to travel through heat. What it does is it tries to reach an equilibrium, and we emit heat constantly in infrared. And so
I get that a lot.
Yeah, right? Yep. So if you were to die, if you died in your spacesuit that was insulated and, for whatever, like you had a heart attack or something, there would be a period of time where the air would eventually run out. It would take time as opposed to you get a rupture and you immediately die.
But if you just tossed a body into space,
like
Battlestar Galactica style, out the airlock, it's going to get cold pretty quick. It's not going to you're not going to find it like months from now and be like, I wonder when he got thrown out because he's still pretty warm.
Right. And it just has to do with the fact that heat tries to reach an equilibrium, and so it's just going to immediately dissipate. It doesn't need a medium, quote unquote, to travel through. It's just one part is hot, one part is cold, and all of the hot will go into the cold.
On the note of infrared, I'll tell you probably the only science factoid that I can correct people on.
Please.
So I briefly worked for Congress a few years ago, and there's a day every year the Pentagon or the Army, I can't remember, some military branch does hey, Hill staffers, you can come to the parking lot and fire guns. Or it's not the parking lot. They've got a designated shooting area. But they brought me down there and let me play with an infrared headset or infrared goggles. And what I became aware of was, because it's infrared, I can't see through windows with this because the infrared rays, I don't know, the infrared rays are bouncing off the glass. So if you ever watch a film where they've got those infrared goggles on and they're spying on someone in their house, that would not work.
Right.
It would just be a black pane because all that infrared's trapped on the inside.
Yes. Very good fact.
Thank
well
you.
done.
I'm
well
trying
done.
so hard to impress you right now, Erin, and I feel like I'm okay.
I'm solid. Go with it.
Okay, so I've got that one. All right, hold on. I'm trying to wrap my head around this next one. I read a quarter of The Elegant Universe before I got a headache and had to stop. And in it, I believe it says that we are all going light speed, except that if there was an XY axis, X being speed with which you're traveling through space, y-axis, speed with which you're traveling through time, we all have the same amount of energy. It's this, we're just unequally or disproportionately allotted across those two axes. So like me, Andrew Heaton, usually going, 60 miles an hour. I'm going pretty fast through the space-time continuum, whereas like if you're going very slow in space, you're going much, much faster. If you're going fast through space, you're going much slower. But we're all actually going light speed?
So, yeah, there's interesting ways to think about this. So this is a lot of the foundation behind special relativity in space-time. This usually ends up with a lot of people getting a migraine and crying in the shower. So
just describe my Tuesday, Erin. Let's just jump into it.
Then let's do it. So you basically have what you do is you build world lines based on space and time. So space-time is the way we describe our universe that is 4-dimensional. We have 3 dimensions.
Milky Way.
We have 3 dimensions in space that we can control our movement in. Right? You go forward, left, right, 60 miles an hour down the freeway, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we also have time. Time moves forward at 1 second per second that we have no control over. And you try to describe motion in our universe combining space and time, and a lot of physics questions fix themselves. So it's this whole idea of relativity, right? That if I was to if I'm going on a train that's going 99.9 times or percent the speed of light, and I shine a flashlight, what happens, right? Like, does someone at the other end ever see it? This has got to
be wrong, but I assume this in my head. We're going 99.9% the speed of light. The flashlight just kind of walks out. The beam walks out of the flashlight so that I can see it like a solid beam.
And that's kind of what a lot of people start thinking about. But that's what they start thinking. Or another good example is you're on a train going fast. You have a friend on a platform watching the train go by. As the train passes, lightning strikes the front and the back at exactly the same time. Your friend sees it happen at exactly the same time. You see it happen in the front first and then in the back first. And so it's this idea of relativity. But if you incorporate space and time together, you're able to fix a lot of those questions. So that's where Einstein basically came in, is he was able to kind of realize that as you go into the space-time world and you combine it all, then, these fundamental physics laws don't get broken. So early 20th century physics is rooted in all of this.
Okay.
And our limit is the speed of light. So we can never... It mostly has to do with causality, right? If I knock something over, it's going to fall to the ground. It's never going to fall faster than the speed of light. I turn the light switch on, the light will hit us. That's traveling at the speed of light. But nothing can go faster than that.
Right.
All of our reference points have to do with cause and effect because of that. So if I, had dominoes and I go to hit one end and the bottom one falls before I hit it, we say we didn't cause that. Maybe it traveled faster than the speed of light. Then it would. But our physics world is fixed on that. So I definitely didn't answer your question.
I've got a hidden agenda on this. If I interpreted that book correctly, and we all are going through space-time at the speed of light, it's just that we're going either through physical speed or then if I have a day that I waste, I can still go. I was still going light speed.
Exactly.
I'm still always going light speed, regardless of what I'm doing.
You traveled through your space-time continuum. You accomplished
I'm a zippy
things.
Guy.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sitting still. Yeah.
Not to mention, you can also take credit for the fact that the Earth is rotating and going around the sun, and the sun's moving in the Milky Way, and the Milky Way is moving through the universe. So we're booking it, man.
So when you're sitting at home on the couch, really, it's just vertigo.
Yeah.
Like you should feel pretty good about
that. Exactly.
All right. I was thinking about this earlier because I was thinking about light speed, faster than light, all that kind of stuff. In, say, any genre that has some variant of warp, right? Mm-hmm. If an asteroid slams into Earth in our world, right, a bunch of people die. A la Deep Impact.
Right.
Right? The documentary that happened. Not good to have asteroids slam into stuff.
Right.
The faster the asteroid or the bigger the mass, the more death and destruction. If you had, say, like the Starship Enterprise and you went warp speed at a planet, wouldn't it be like a giant nuclear bomb?
I like that. So
because they never do. Like I'm glad. Like don't tell the people in Star Trek because I don't want every ship to be a weapon of mass destruction. But aren't they all weapons of mass destruction?
Pretty much. But this is why Sulu has a job.
Okay, right.
So you need a navigator to make sure that your warp bubble isn't interfering. So I won't get into it too much. I was introduced at a convention once as a warp drive expert, which at that point I felt like All right.
Wait, does
Career
that
done.
exist?
It does now. Apparently, I am one.
I suppose you could be the most expert person on warp drives. That is entirely possible.
I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah. Okay.
So, the idea of warp drive is that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, but nothing says space-time itself can't travel faster than the speed of light. So use the bowling ball and the trampoline analogy for gravity. Think of the trampoline as space-time, right? Nothing on the surface can go faster than that. But you could build a bubble of space-time around your ship, and that can move faster than the speed of light and just propel you forward. You want to go even faster? Build another bubble around that, and you have warp factor 1, 2, 3, so on. When you arrive at your destination, you
Wait, is that when they say like warp 7? There's 7 warp bubbles?
Pretty much, yeah. That's a way to interpret it. Yeah,
nice.
Exactly.
All right.
And but when you go out of warp, you basically disintegrate that warp bubble, right? You let go of that. And so there would be some shock wave that's coming out from that in space-time. Now, space-time is very rigid. This is why building warp drive is hard. This is why things like detecting gravitational waves, which is what I used to work on, is really, really hard because that trampoline is really rigid and it does have some flexibility, but it's hard to move. So even if you come out of warp close-ish to a planet, the impacts are going to be pretty negligible. Now, going faster than the speed of light, hurtling straight at a planet, yeah, you're not going to want to do that.
You can feel that. Even with airbags, you can feel that. Yeah.
You would feel that because, like you said, you have a mass that's moving very, very fast, and that is going to have momentum, and that will do destruction.
Okay, so then in Star Trek, you've got you've got what is it? Not sublight, but you've got impulse.
Impulse.
Impulse. So that's you're still going very, very fast, but you're still within kind of the range of Newtonian physics.
Yep.
And you got warp. At that point, you're not actually going fast. Space-time itself around you is going fast.
Yeah.
Hence, you wouldn't warp into a planet.
Right.
You're okay. All right. That makes sense to me. I think
the bubble that you have around you will carry you into the planet, but your ship is contained in that bubble. That's why the physics is fine when you're there. You're not experiencing any of those weird effects like time dilation or rapid aging compared to everyone else because your space-time is normal. It's space-time itself, that bubble is propelling you. So if you were to warp to a planet, then it just carries your ship there and drops you off, which is pretty nice. Yeah.
And I watched your delightful video on was it gravity? No, time dilation.
Time dilation, yeah.
And it was the first time I'd ever heard tachyon used outside of Star Trek technobabble. I could be wrong about this, and eventually I'll talk to a Star Trek writer, but I feel like Star Trek writers will write a script and then just put in brackets babble or technobabble, and then someone like you will come in.
Exactly.
And go, oh well, we can't do it because of the tachyon surge. And I was like apparently tachyons are real. I had no idea, and I think tachyons are like if we're using this trampoline metaphor, we've got the bowling ball and we've got our golf ball circling this. A tachyon is somebody poking their finger up from the bottom, and going the other way around.
Yep, and because of that, it's like they're surfing on space-time, so they're always going faster than the speed of light, and they are 100% theoretical particles. They were not.
So we've not found these things yet.
We've never found them because they're always traveling faster than the speed of light, and we don't know how to detect something like that. But they are theoretical. This negative mass, right, that is always traveling faster than the speed of light. Star Trek just kind of co-opted them, and to be fair, they use them pretty well. They're, left over from warp drive because you're breaking causality going faster than the speed of light. They're indicators of time travel, right? That's how they knew.
So if I walk into a room and I'm like, it smells like tachyons in here, then I'd be like, maybe somebody was time traveling.
That's how they detected Daniels in Enterprise.
Okay.
There was a surge of tachyons on the Enterprise, and they realized that crewman Daniels was a temporal agent.
So if I get an alert on my iPhone of be aware there's been a tachyon surge in your area, I'll be like, oh man, there's probably been some time travel. I need to see if anybody's messing with gambling statistics or something, or trying to stop somebody from getting shot. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
I dig that a lot. Yeah. Okay. While we're on the subject of Enterprise, am I right in thinking that there would probably be a circuit breaker on the bridge somewhere? Because whenever they get in a fight, I'll preface this: I don't typically like to nitpick science fiction to death, and I'll say also I think the best example of it ever. There's an essay in written in darkness by troubled Americans by McSweeney's called On the Feasibility of the Death Star Trash Compactor. That's brilliant. Nice. It really just goes through, like you mentioned earlier, the floating debris in space. That's talking about why would you want to, anyway. It's really sublime and probably the apotheosis of nitpicking techno stuff in science fiction. In Star Trek, every time they get in a fight, one of the panels explodes, and then a bunch of people fling over the rails. And I'm thinking, well, one, I feel like you'd have to have pretty solid inertial dampeners if you're going to go, let's say 40,000 miles an hour or whatever it is. Like, I feel like because they'll stop normally if they're not in a fight, they'll stop and they'll just stop. But then when they're in battle, like they'll all lurch and stuff. And I'm like, well, if you're going 400 miles an hour, and then the other thing is, I just assume, like, if you shoot a submarine with a missile or something, that they've got some kind of fail-safe so the panels just don't explode. I've never made panels before, but I feel like LCD screens would have some kind of circuit breaker in them. Yeah. And I feel like Star Trek would too. Is that just drama?
With the circuit breakers and the electronics exploding, it is purely drama. I couldn't even begin to tell you how they wire up the bridge of the Enterprise to do something like that, or what the intelligent way to do it. With inertial dampeners, though, I do have a theory, because I love things like inertial dampeners in science fiction.
Which you would definitely need, right?
Right. But it's one of those things where it's like, so inertia is, what pulls us back into our chair when we head off in a car or in an airplane. It's why we wear seatbelts, because we're going to want to keep moving and the car has stopped moving. And so if you're going to warp or even impulse, you want inertial dampeners because you're going really, really fast, and inertia will make you pancake against the back of the bridge.
Right.
And so I love it because it's like we acknowledge physics is being shattered, but we're just going to say we fixed it. We have inertial dampeners.
We've got an FTL driver. Whatever. We'll make up a term here.
And I do have another great example of that. But first with the getting lurched around. The way I see it is the inertial dampeners work like that oobleck, like that non-Newtonian fluid where if cornstarch and water...
Wait,
if anyone's,
what? Oobleck? What is this?
Oobleck is
that's a Philip K. Dick novel, isn't it?
Possibly. It's the kid toy stuff. I don't know what it's like technically called, but it's a non-Newtonian fluid where you mix cornstarch and water, and if you punch it, you hit a hard surface. But if you poke your finger through slowly, it's a liquid. Really fun to play with. Look up how it is.
This is my Saturday. I'm going to track down some oobleck.
Exactly. Easy to make, super fun. I think the inertial dampeners work that way. I think that it's like they have some slow spin up, right, to kind of catch the ship as it's going. Maybe you have this non-Newtonian oobleck fluid around the bridge that kind of catches it.
Okay.
But it's not going to do well with quick,
So then in theory, it would be very difficult to disco dance on the Enterprise. Like your hand would just freeze in space. But if you were doing a really slow modern art dance, you could do it just fine.
There you go.
This is fascinating, and I feel like great fodder for Star Trek.
This is how I science this.
Yeah, I hope that they slip you into the meetings there at the end where they're like, hey, any ideas? And you're like, what if they had a dance party?
Right, exactly.
And the inertial dampeners stop them from doing that. That's cool. I like that.
I love it. Yeah.
I was also thinking about this because last night I just brainstormed and I was thinking about all the things in sci-fi that didn't make sense to me. And it occurred to me that, granted, the reason every ship in science fiction has gravity is because it would cost way too much to have everybody floating around. That makes sense. We can forgive just the actual studio constraints and why everybody has gravity. Mm-hmm. That said, though, if I were designing a spaceship, if there were any inertia at all, I would have the decks parallel I would have the decks perpendicular to the source of the thrust rather than parallel. So in Star Trek, you've got the nacelles, and so it looks like a ship on Earth. But if you were doing something with actual thrust, I would do it more like a rocket. So the Enterprise would look more like a tower. Right. With the nacelles, and on the bridge, it would just be this, it'd be like 50 decks that are not that big. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's right. And actually, the Expanse does that.
Oh, really?
So the Expanse they're kind of three flavors for artificial gravity in science fiction. There's rotational artificial gravity,
so that's
2001.
Exactly,
yeah. The Martian did that as well.
Yeah.
They had rotating parts. So that's where you use centrifugal force to basically
which is the only thing we can currently do, right?
Or we could theoretically
do magnets.
Linear acceleration, which is what you're talking about.
Okay,
so but the problem with that is
eating magnets would not be.
Eating magnets is not probably recommended for artificial gravity. Magnet boots.
Think it out of the box.
Hey, I'm down. But the linear artificial gravity, you'd have to constantly accelerate at 9.8 meters per second squared. acceleration needs a force, right? And force is fuel. So you would always be accelerating. You'd have a limit because you'd eventually reach the speed of light.
Right. And then also at some point you'd have to start slowing down to arrive at your destination.
So in The Expanse, what they do this, and they use it just for exploring our solar system, and they flip the ship halfway to their destination and then decelerate the entire way at 9.8 meters per second. So really cool way of doing it.
Interesting.
We just don't have energy sources sufficient to be able to do it, and we would only be able to use that to explore our own solar system because we would hit the speed of light about 1 light year from the sun.
When you say energy sources, I mean it would just take so much gas effectively, or it would take so much fuel that we would need either more efficient solar power or better nuclear reactors or something like that?
Exactly.
Okay.
Most science fiction uses the other category, which is we have a gravity generator.
We've got a gravitron grid.
Don't ask further questions.
Yeah. Okay. Which is what I would do. Although I'm going to take notes for this. If I write a sci-fi novel in the not too distant future, 100% I'm going to steal all of this. And listen to that again.
You know how to call. Yeah.
Here's now I know you're not a geneticist. However, am I right in since Star Trek, every single species can mate with every other species and produce viable offspring?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this, and I was like, if you took, I don't know, an aardvark and a monkey, I'm pretty sure that you can't get viable offspring.
Right.
But if you get like a Vulcan, and I, by the way, I have no idea how dating even. I would never date a Vulcan.
Right.
But somehow you like presumably the humans had a couple, and the Vulcans in Ponfarn nope, totally viable offspring.
Yeah. So I cannot take credit for any of this. This is my friend, Dr. Muhammad Noor, who's a dean of natural sciences at Duke, who's a big Trekkie.
Please tell me he wrote a book called Star Trek Mating.
He wrote a book called Live Long and Evolve.
Okay. Wait, what was his name again?
100% valid. Muhammad Noor. Look him up. Cool. Him and I are both going to be speaking on the Star Trek cruise next year.
Oh, my God.
So
how do I get your life? That sounds great. If they need a warm-up act of like a comedian that knows sci-fi, let him know. I can totally be that guy.
Noted. So he has a talk called Evolution in Star Trek where he goes through cross-species mating.
Okay.
There's also that Next Gen episode where they try to explain that everyone came from the same, right?
Yeah. And there's that founding species that seeded the galaxy, so actually everybody's kind of got comparable DNA.
Right. And so he goes through all the different explanations that Star Trek has given for where humans and Vulcans and Klingons and Romulans have come from, and if it's even feasible that they would be from the same species over the time. And spoiler, it's not. But there are ways that we could science it such that there could be cross-species breeding and there would be enough time for everyone to evolve independently. But the problem is just like I have that issue with distances in space. He's got that explanation of it takes time for stuff to happen, and for we would be about as related to Klingons as we are to grass.
Right.
We
would be more similar to jellyfish than we would be to Klingons.
Exactly. And just the amount of time that they were trying to give that explanation for, we would diverge so much.
Yeah.
But still really fun to think about. So I'm glad I could answer your question because I do not do squishy things.
Yeah.
But I know Muhammad and we talk about this all the time.
It's also one of those things where I'll kind of give. I mean, when it's a good plot device, and I like all of the characters that are built out of that, like the conflict that Spock has, the conflict that I guess Taurus on Voyager doesn't really have so much of that issue. She's just kind of Klingon.
Yeah, she had that really good episode where she and Tom Paris, again, cross species, they're having a baby, and she doesn't want her baby has forehead ridges because apparently that's passed down through the female. I watch a lot of Voyager.
Wait, so it's like Judaism? You could either be Jewish or Klingon? Klingons through that? Wow, okay.
And so in theory, if there's cross species between a Klingon and another species, if it's a girl, they'll have forehead ridges. That's what the doctor says.
Wait, so if Worf had a kid with Deanna Troi, would have had a smooth forehead?
If the kid was a girl, they would have inherited, if I understand this.
Well, hold on. So is it the female that passes on the ridges?
It has to be. We are really dodgy with my level of genetics understanding.
Yeah.
So, well, read Mohammed's book, Live Long and Evolve.
He might well be he might well be a follow-up interview.
We'll hit him up on Twitter about this afterwards.
I'll say in the same way that I don't begrudge science fiction for having gravity. Mm-hmm. I don't begrudge science fiction for the fact that every species is a biped with weird eyebrows.
Right.
Like Star Wars does a good job visually with, say, like Jabba the Hutt.
Yes.
Where it's like that is completely different evolutionary tree. There's very little doubt that like humans went to a swamp planet and lost their leg. There's some other thing going on. Greedo looks very different. Star Trek tends to be more of the like, oh wow, they've got a wrinkly nose. Yeah. Like what a different. But I get that. You've got a limited budget. I think Orson Scott Card does a very good job with that. Have you read much Orson Scott Card?
No, it's been a long time, so you have to refresh me.
He's got multiple series, and I've not read the entirety of it. But Ender's Game, which is probably the one he's most famous for, as I understand it, because I haven't read the whole scope of it, but I've read the first 4 or 5 books. There are really only like 3 species in the galaxy. There's humans, there's this kind of bipedal pig species, and then there's this insectoid species. And a driving force in that novel, in that series, is that the insectoid species is just so different that they can't even think the same way we think. We really have no means by which to communicate with them. Whereas in Star Trek, you just get a communicator, and then everybody somehow sounds like they're from Iowa. Unless they're smart, then they're British.
Right.
And that's how we work. But in Ender's Game, it's like, no, you can't even conceive. And they had that to some extent if you read The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov. Where they're able to send data back and forth between 2 universes, but it's like we have literally no reference point.
Right.
And they can't do any type of communication.
Yeah, I think some other really good examples of that. So we give a lot of public talks, like myself, Mohammed, and some other friends. And we have one, Eric Spana and Stephen Grenade.
He should call his book Sex and Star Trek. What is wrong with that guy? I'm going to call him just to do better marketing. Sex and Star Trek, Mohammed. That's what you should call it. And it should be like a silhouette of a Vulcan making out with somebody else. And it would have sold so many more.
Off the shelf.
Is he a professor? He's probably a professor. Professors can't name books. They're terrible at naming books. All right.
Live Long and Evolve is pretty good, though. I'll give him credit for that.
It's catchy, yeah.
But we do have a talk.
Sex and Star Trek.
Yeah, exactly. We do have a talk we all give that's Star Wars versus Star Trek Science Showdown Battle. Ooh. And one of the things they bring up that Eric and Mohammed fight about is, because Eric's the biologist defending Star Wars, is talking about biological diversity. But another really good, and it's exactly what you talked about, another really good sci-fi series fandom that addresses that is Mass Effect. It's a video game series. The biology in Mass Effect is unbelievable with the different species and how they have the different species kind of being based on trees here on Earth. So the fact that you have, like Garrus is one of the main characters. His species is very bird-like. You have another species, the Krogan, that are very kind of lizard-like. And for example, one of the things they do is the Krogan don't have sexual dimorphism, so the males look as much like the females, which we have here on Earth. Sci-fi always wants to put boobs on women.
Yeah, that's very much so.
They're like mammalian glands because we're mammals. Like there is.
Oh my God, you just blew my mind. So if there's a reptile species
with boobs,
it makes no sense.
It makes no sense. 0 sense.
Oh yeah.
I think Doctor Who even at one point has a tree species, and the tree
still
women
hot
have
trees.
boobs.
It's still hot smoking trees. That's like the original TOS series. I've gotten into TOS the last couple of years. I love it. I think it's basically like it. I think it's kind of the Twilight Zone in space. It's much. It's very very deep stuff. But then you'll get like the odd episode where it's like, I can't remember the episode, but Kirk beams down to a planet, and it's the brains are controlling everybody for gambling purposes.
Yeah.
And the woman that he's paired up with is wearing what I can only describe as like a tinfoil diaper. Like it is somehow revealing and not sexy at the same time. It's the only time I've ever seen that where it's like, let's maximize skin while minimizing erections. Like I don't know how they did it.
That is brilliant. I'd say the original series had that down to a T.
They were very good at that. Like where there's probably some guy in the back with a clipboard who's like, guys, I'm sorry, the FCC says you got to make it less hot. The boobs are fine. We understand that every species in the galaxy, every species has cleavage. There is no species that's like a surfboard.
Right.
Every species. Yeah. I hadn't even thought about
That's funny.
So that for the rest of my life, if I see or then like
I've ruined sci-fi species for you now because they put boobs on everyone.
So then
but Mass Effect's the only one that we've seen that has like reptilian species that does. There's probably more out there we haven't seen.
I'm thinking like what is it? Is it V? The series. So V came out maybe in the 70s or 80s, and it's modern day.
Yeah.
And aliens come down and they're all gorgeous, but. When you eventually one of them gets hit with a baseball or something and its skin peels and it turns out it's a reptile.
Right.
But they all look stacked.
Right.
And like all of the women are like Swedish supermodels and they clearly have boobs.
They did come with nefarious purposes, so they just know what will be a trap.
You know what? Then I'm thinking too. Like I don't know that I've ever because I never finished either series. I think maybe I finished the 70s one because I watched that when I was a kid. The new one I only saw 2 or 3 episodes. Could be that the flesh suit includes boobs and that's it. Like you take that off and there's no nipples or anything, which would make sense because why would a reptile have nipples?
So funny.
Reptiles don't have nipples might be the title of this episode, Erin. That is like I bring out a physicist, like we start out talking about tachyons and stuff, and then it's just a 45-minute diatribe about nipples.
I've just co-opted all my biology friends' content, so it's fine. I gave him credit.
Okay, I'm gonna table this one.
Okay.
Because I don't want to run out of nipple talk for when I bring on Dr. Mohammed Noor to discuss Star Trek sex. So. Deep breath, Heaton. We're going to move on to another thing. Here's what I was thinking about yesterday. I talked to a friend of mine recently about Isaac Asimov, and I was thinking about population density as it's portrayed in science fiction. And see, I'm better at the economic stuff than I am at the physics stuff. So, like in the Foundation series, Trantor, which is the main capital, has I think 45 billion people on it, and he describes it as a planet that has, I think it's 7 miles of top to bottom metal the whole way over. Wow. And in my head, I'm kind of doing the math like roundabouts, and I'm like, if it's a planet the size of Earth, that would still be way more than 45 billion people. It'd be upwards of like about 1 trillion.
Yeah.
And like you see a lot of these science fiction films where it's first of all it's always raining on an overpopulated planet. Like Blade Runner, for some reason, all of Blade Runner is Seattle grunge rock scene.
Fifth Element.
Yeah, Fifth Element. It's always raining. It's always kind of smoky. And then it's really, really, really overpopulated.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like I could see overpopulation being a thing, but the point at which is just chock-a-block. Like you'd have to have so many people at that point that it would be like upwards of 50 billion or something like that, which they usually don't say. They're like, oh, there's 12 billion people.
Yeah.
Or if you go back and you read old sci-fi, it's great because old sci-fi, like maybe Kurt Vonnegut, but they'll be like, oh man, in 2020 there'll be 5 billion people, and like that's like bum bum bum.
Right.
It's like
where are they gonna go?
Where are the 5 billion people gonna live?
Yeah. That's interesting though. I like that sort of metal 7 miles high. What that population would be. I really want to do the math on that and how it would affect. No, it wouldn't. Figure out how much vertical space every person needs.
I'll, again, like it's always the economics of things that get infeasible for me. So, like Independence Day,
Top 5.
It's a great film. I really enjoy it. Actually, I'll tell you one of my party tricks is I will if I'm for some reason called upon to give a speech impromptu, or if I'm ever in another country on the 4th of July, I will we both lived in Scotland. When I lived in Edinburgh. It was the 4th of July one year, and I co-opted a microphone at a pub quiz, and like they don't care. It's the 4th of July, and I'm like, hey, everybody, I know I'm bothering you. I'm really sorry, but it is the 4th of July. It's Independence Day. This is an American holiday, and I feel that we should celebrate and mark this day somehow, and so I'm going to give a famous speech from American history. According to legend, the president actually wrote this on the way to the speech. And it's short, but I think you'll agree that it's very pungent. A lot of people believe that it's based off of Pericles' funeral oration. And I then I do the speech from Independence Day, and you could see the Scots go from we're going to kill him with a bottle to oh, Independence Day, that's great, buy him a pint.
Exactly.
Great film. I love Independence Day. However, I have to say the economics of it are terrible.
Awesome.
Because the economics of Independence Day are they're built on a resource predation model. So our species is like locusts, and we go from one system to another to get all the stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking that would be like, imagine if it turns out there's oil on Mars, and Dick Cheney is like, we're going to invade it. And you're like, wait a minute, Dick, the math for us to get to Mars, like we're going to have to spend so much money to get that oil, it's not going to be worth it. It would be like it would be like driving from New York to L.A. to get like 30 cents off fries. Like, it just doesn't compute. And same with Independence Day. Like, the point at which you can build like a small moon and go from one system to another, like at that point you can probably just convert hydrogen into whatever you want.
Right. And the resources that are just out in space are really useful. And I am curious. I have zero brain for economics, which is weird because like I'm a mathematician. I love math. Theoretical physics is my jam. I love equations.
Just be more sad. If you get more depressed, you get better at economics. That's how it works.
That must be. But I'm so curious what's going to happen to our economics once we start doing asteroid mining because there's like nickel and gold, like rare metals that we use in our technologies all the time that suddenly will be every day.
That's not even really science fiction. Like, because James Cameron, the guy that went to the bottom of the Marianas Trench in a submarine, and also made Titanic, who's now become the sci-fi blazer. James Cameron has started his own company to harvest asteroids, right?
Yep.
And I think maybe Musk. It wouldn't surprise me if Musk has some tendril going on. There's 2 or 3 of these outfits doing that, and. There's a couple of them. One, I think part of the idea is they'll go out and, I mean, there are like nuggets of gold the size of Texas floating out in the solar system, right? And if you were to pull that down back towards Earth and have like a satellite of, first of all, please aim correctly. Because it would be really ironic if mankind killed itself by firing a nugget the size of...
That'd be about
That's how we die, yeah.
That'd be about right.
So how did you guys kill yourself? We went to the asteroid belt and fired a gold nugget on our planet.
Gold?
Yeah, we just really like jewelry. And but let's say we don't hit it and we just have it floating up there. Well, gold, which is typically a more, let's say it's more stable than Bitcoin.
Right.
It would plummet in value because at that point,
exactly.
And unless you had a cartel, because like diamonds are actually very proliferate, but there's a cartel that runs them.
Right.
That artificially increase the cost of them.
Right. And I think nickel too is going to be a big one because that's such a component in our technologies that suddenly like phones are going to dirt cheap, like really good technology, because that's usually what you're paying for. And then there's a whole thing about like how no one can own property in space, right? We have the international treaty with that. But they've tried to figure out ways. So I think
is there no private property in space? I thought it was just there's no national distinctions in space.
So they've tried to figure out establishing laws for private property and how that works. And I think the way my current understanding of space mining law as it stands now has been
Which
agreed
I could become
to.
an expert in.
You should, because I find it fascinating.
I should do this. I should become an expert in space law.
You should, and I just love it. I think you can't own the asteroid, but you can own the mining material, and you can own whatever you extract.
So the infrastructure is yours.
Infrastructure and then what you extract.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But like space piracy is going to be a thing, right? Because how can you prove that that's what you dug up? Right?
Oh, right.
And space is big and dark and scary. And like automation is probably going to be most of what you're doing.
Oh, this is great. So, there's still a small chance I could become a pirate.
Right.
And I could live in space.
A space pirate.
Meaning all of my fantasies for Big 12.
Yes, exactly.
Except for the reptiles with nipples. All of those will come to fruition.
Exactly. Anyway, fun stuff.
Yeah, the economics of stuff is what tends to hit me. I think you're right about that. All of that will change. And there's all sorts of interesting stuff there. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up 3 tropes in science fiction that I think are wrong all the time.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. If you and I are on different spaceships and we fire some sort of missile at you and you blow up, I'm not going to hear it on my spaceship because there's no medium with which sound would travel through, right?
Correct.
I would see the explosion.
Correct.
But I wouldn't hear anything.
Right. And even then the explosion wouldn't be terribly interesting because fire needs oxygen.
Right. So just kind of crumple?
It would, because there would still be oxygen, there would be fuel on the ship itself that is still going to ignite. It's just going to go out right away.
Okay.
It's not going to be that sustained cool
and then also
fireball.
You can't see lasers, right? Like you can if you fire a laser through fog, you can see the laser through fog.
I see what you mean, yeah.
But if I've got like a little laser to mess with a cat, you can't see that unless there's something to transmit it through.
Right.
But in all science fiction...
You can see where it hits, though. It's still going to travel through space.
Yeah, you can see that. Or if it's, I guess, like if it's fog, right, there are particles that it's reflecting off of. But there's not a lot of fog in space.
It's zero.
So if I'm
zero.
firing... there's zero fog in space. As I said, there is apparently a cloud of booze. I used to work on a television show a few years ago, and I used to do these, we'd do trivia shows. Every once in a while. And one of them was on space or something, and it was a true or false, and there is like a massive cloud of the same chemical equation of booze floating out there. It's like the size of the planet Earth, and they think it would taste like strawberries. I have no idea how they work that out. But there is like
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Maybe the Independence Day spaceship went through that, went on a bender, and then they were like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to go down to Earth, and we're going to paint the town red. We've been getting their sitcoms, and we hate laugh tracks. Anyway, lasers. You wouldn't you wouldn't see a phaser or anything like that, right? You would just see the explosion.
Depending what it is. So I have a theory about this too, because if it is even light itself, it would travel so fast we couldn't even be able to see it. So I think most of what photon torpedoes, blasters, any of that stuff, I think that's plasma.
Okay.
I think they're wrongly spoken as like light beams or lasers.
Plasma is like, so that you've got various states of matter. It can either be solid, liquid, or gas. And plasma is the kind of transition from that to energy.
It's superheated gas.
Okay,
so it's like
gas,
a fourth, so if you were to take gas and just superheat it.
And a major component of our blood.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Different kind. So I think it's mostly like plasma, the Stormtrooper blaster rifles.
Right, okay.
I don't think they're shooting laser beams.
Right,
I don't
okay.
think photon torpedoes are necessarily packets of photons. I think that they are high-energy plasma. This is my headcanon for science fiction.
That makes sense.
Because you can see that.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't travel. It would travel at a speed that you could see.
And it would probably hurt to get hit by it, too, right? Because, laser, all the lasers I've used, you'd really have to shine it a long time on somebody. You'd have to ask them to sit still.
And right in their eye.
Stop, I got it on your sternum, don't move.
Exactly.
Whereas, if you'd have superheated gas that you flung at someone, that'd hurt.
There is a fun research paper someone did. It was for Wired or something, where they did a frame-by-frame study of the blasts in Star Wars to figure out how fast they're actually moving. And they got them at about 75 miles an hour, which is like a slow pitch. That's why they don't hit anything, because you can get out of the way.
Because if you've got reasonably good instincts, you just okay.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, fun fact.
I'll swing for Star Wars here, because I think most science fiction people, either want to nitpick things to death or come up with an of no. I'm in the no camp.
Same.
So with Star Wars, because the stormtroopers have terrible aim.
Right.
A theory that I heard, which might have been from Dan, the aforementioned friend that I slagged about his thermodynamics and space guy. The theory is that when they're firing at Jedi, the Jedi actually have, due to their force capacity or their force power, have an ability to kind of evade things, right? So the force is actually interfering with the aim. Hence why if it were stormtrooper army versus another stormtrooper army, they'd be deadly crack shots.
Right.
But as it is, they're really terrible at it by virtue of the force.
I like that.
Yeah.
I would counterpoint the battle in the Phantom Menace between the droids and the stormtroopers, because I don't think anyone hit anything.
Yeah.
that wasn't the Clone Wars. That was just droids and never mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
destroyed my Star Wars cred.
I'll give credit to Star Wars and something else too. Like something that I really like about Star Wars aesthetically that Star Trek doesn't have is Star Wars has scuff marks and garbage.
Yeah.
Star Trek, there's not a garbage pail anywhere in the entire Star Trek universe.
I know.
It's never a part of it. Everything looks brand new. Everything is completely monolithically fine. Whereas in Star Wars, they'll open up a door and you can see that door is a little bit ajar. It's causing there to be a crease and things like that.
I love it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, even in Star Trek, the sonic showers, what kind of nonsense is that?
What would that be? They reference that.
Yeah.
Which I hope is in the sex book. But I don't know.
So I guess the idea is that you just get bombarded with sound waves, which are just compression waves of air, right? So you could do it at a frequency that you wouldn't hear.
Oh, okay.
You would just have compression air waves basically hitting your body and shaking loose all the dirt. Actually, this sounds like a kind of thing they do at Burning Man. You're covered with dust. Yeah.
And you go in and they've got some awesome entrepreneur booth that the thing they make for free is it'll shake all the dust off your body.
Exactly.
And it's playing Electric Light Orchestra, but you can't hear it. Only dogs can hear it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can see that.
Sonic shower, 100%.
Okay. I think we've covered pretty much everything. I'll round it out then to get back to earlier, because I'd kicked off my Erin escapades by watching your time dilation thing. Space travel without time travel would be difficult, right? Because again, Orson Scott Card. One of the things I'll give about Orson Scott Card is all of the space travel is sublight. So anytime that you're, at least in the Ender's Game theories, anytime that you're traveling from one planet to another, you need to be aware of the fact that you're going to get there, 300 years later. They do have a thing called the transom. So in that universe, you can communicate. So like civilizations are able to have some degree of cohesion for that reason. But you've got that. But yeah, the rest of the time, like if you were trying to like go to war or something without having a faster than light drive, like you'd get there and it would have already resolved itself.
Well, even then, even if you do have a faster than light capability, you still have to know where the planets you're looking at are going to be when you get there, because we're seeing the light that was emitted from them. If they're 4, 8, 10, 20 light years away, we're seeing where they were 20 years ago, for example. So one sci-fi series that did deal with that is Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
So they have the jump drive, right? What that is doing is it's not that your ship is going faster than the speed of light. You take a point in space-time, bend it to your ship, jump, and then unbend. Takes a ton of energy, takes time. You have to spool up the FTL drive. But they talk about, what was it, the red line? I think the red limit.
Yeah. It's like the extent to which they can do it.
Right. And it's not so much the extent to which they can do it. It's more of the fact that it's so much of a risk beyond that. Like the probability of knowing where everything is going to be, where you jump.
Interesting. It's just like a quantitative analysis thing, which like beyond that, our computers are really straining to figure out where stuff is.
Because chaos theory, right? You can only predict to a certain amount where things are going to be. And over periods of 20, 100 years, there's going to be some variations to those.
Right.
So yeah, science fiction does kind of address that. But
nice.
It's interesting.
Well done, Battlestar Galactica.
I know. Yeah.
Okay. Final question then.
Yep.
In theory, if you could make a wormhole, or you had, let's say you had a device which would you have like a portal that you can make a wormhole in, and you can move this thing. If I put one on a ship going light speed, or like 90% of light speed for like 300 years, would I have created a time portal? Since the wormhole going near the speed of light would not be going at the same speed?
Right.
Could I go backwards in time?
I kind of like where you're thinking that. The problem is you'd have to anchor the other side of the wormhole to wherever you left it from. So if you're carrying it with you...
It's the bit that always catches me up. I can't anchor that wormhole.
And actually, a great example of that is Star Trek, again, Voyager. I do have a Voyager tattoo on my arm. So
wait, what?
This is legit, yeah.
Wow! Oh my God!
One of my favorite episodes from the first season is called Eye of the Needle, where they find a micro wormhole that's linking the Delta Quadrant to the Alpha Quadrant. For people that aren't as well versed, the whole point of Voyager is that they are lost in the Delta Quadrant and trying to get home.
Yeah.
And it's not big enough for them to travel through, but they can communicate. And they find a Romulan who's being Romulan-y, and they try to figure out a way they can get there. But then they realize it's actually connecting space and time, and the Romulan is further back in time than they were. So wormholes do shortcut space and time. You could artificially generate them by basically bending points in space and time wherever you want to go, stapling it together through a wormhole and just leaving it there. Those are like artificial stargates, things like that. There are natural wormholes in theory. Mathematically possible.
What?
Mathematically possible.
I just thought it was a Deep Space Nine invention.
No. Mathematically possible. You can do the math and make a wormhole. Let's say there's a tunnel in space and time that shortcuts. We can't ever prove we don't, because visually, dynamically, geometrically, it looks like a black hole. It's identical to a black hole. So it's hard to say if it goes anywhere.
And pretty big risk jumping into a black hole.
Yeah, I'm not taking that risk. So...
Or maybe it works, but you get like spaghettied.
Right,
so like you do get to go back in time as like a nanoparticle width that's as long as the solar system.
It's my favorite actual science term is spaghettification.
Yes, spaghettification. Yeah.
So yeah, wormholes theoretically could exist, and you could do exactly what you're doing, whether you carry one half of it to the other, punch it together. I think. The way, in fact, I went on a whole Twitter thread about this yesterday, is how the hyperdrive in Star Wars works in my mind, because they never science it, is that you use, as they say, superluminous, faster than light, tachyons to build a warp bubble, essentially. You build a hyperspace route. So what you do is the tachyons invert space-time. Like you said, you poke from beneath, so it bends up. And then your ship is in that, and it's building a wormhole as you're traveling through it. You get to your destination, you exit hyperspace, and that basically disintegrates.
Okay, I know I said I was going to end the thing with a wormhole, but I just want to, because this is important to me that I understand this.
Yeah.
Okay, so in Battlestar Galactica, the FTL drive, faster than light drive, is kind of a wrinkle in time type thing where you've got space-time fabric and they're able to bend it so that they're going from point A to point B. They're not actually going that fast, but they're bending space-time and kind of leaping across that fabric. In Star Trek, you're building a warp bubble.
Correct.
And space-time is moving. But you are not. So you're not portaling like you are with an FTL in Battlestar Galactica, but space-time itself is moving.
It's propelling you. Yeah, okay. Space-time is moving.
And then in Star Wars, you are kind of making your own wormhole.
Yeah, as you're going. That's kind of how I see it. And it's hard to think about because if you think about the trampoline, that area above it or below it is kind of that hyperspace or subspace. And so if you think like, okay, well, you're building a tunnel, that's actually longer than it would be to just go straight. But that's assuming it's perfectly flat. And that's a lot of using wormholes for faster than light travel is that idea that, okay, it looks flat in broad spectrum, but maybe think of it like if you took a big bunch of toilet paper, crumpled it up, laid it out. There might be parts where it's folded over. There's parts where there's bumps and ridges. So you could shortcut those distances. And that's exactly, in my sciencing, what Star Wars does. And it's holding true.
Okay.
So I've headcanoned it. But it's still solid, and if they need a science consultant...
I hope you get it. Man.
Thanks.
Dr. Erin Macdonald, you are brilliant and charming. I loved talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the program. If other people found you as delightful as I did, where can they find you?
So mostly on Twitter, at Dr. Erin Mac, DrErinMac. Same handle for Instagram. My YouTube channel is Dr. Erin Explains the Universe. And, I'm happy to engage with people online.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Howdy, friend. Thanks for listening to the interview. Probably this podcast becomes one of the most important works in all of human history, and you're a space historian analyzing it thousands of years in the future, on the moon. But if you're listening to this as it came out, this is only the second week of alienating the audience. So, if you would rate and review it on your podcast platform of choice, that will really help share the show with other fellow nerds who so desperately need it. Thank you.
When you're a comedian, you have to go to a lot of places, and sometimes they suck. And I went to Coruscant here recently, and it is just the suck. It's just...
Oh, come on.
It's 15 floors of sucking built on top of a gutter. That's what Coruscant is. I did not care for it, and the only silver lining is that I went with my good friend Nick Sperduti, who is a fellow vagabonding interstellar comedian. And anyway, we're off of that godforsaken rock.
Okay, well, first of all, before you just start trashing the planet, why don't we tell everyone what happened about 15 minutes after you got off the ship?
Yeah, okay, I'll tell you. About 15 minutes after I got off the ship, a bunch of dickheads put me in jail. That was a great way to kick off my trip.
They were Jedis, Heaton. They were Jedis. You're supposed to just do what they said. Instead, you just started yelling at them and saying, we pay with our taxes, we pay your wages.
We do. They work for us, and I pointed that out to them. I said, you know what? You're not the boss of me. I'm the boss of you. I'm a tax-paying citizen. And if you're here as a law enforcement official...
First of all, we don't even pay taxes on that planet.
Yeah, but they didn't know that. They all look like white guys with beards if they're humans. I totally blended in, and no, that whole thing. They took my pocket knife, which is like, okay, I ask you this, all right? Mm-hmm. I'm allowed to have a blaster. That was fine. No one had a problem with a blaster.
Because you have the permit.
Yeah, okay, I had a permit, but I still think it's a weird that you need you can have a permit for a blaster, but you can't have a permit for a pocket knife. That's just stupid. That's just stupid that I had, and then I had to get a visa when I came in. I didn't know that, so I'm already out 14 credits for this stupid piece of paper. And then a Jedi comes over and he's like, is there a problem here, sir? And I was like, yeah, there's a problem. Your dumbass planet just charged me 14 credits to step foot on it. And nobody told me about that before I got on the ship. And then the whole thing just escalated. And I acknowledge that shouting, you work for me, was probably not the best way to de-escalate the situation. But I don't feel like that guy, I feel like he could have, all right, takes two to tango, and he definitely wanted to tango. That's what I'm saying.
I'll say this. Not only was it not the best way, but it was the worst way. And personally, I liked it. I had a great time. I wasn't with you most of the time because you were locked up in the airport.
I was in a prison cell most of the time.
Yeah, and I had to go out and do my shows by myself. Don't get me wrong. I killed. It was great. It was a good time. I told you about this. I'm not trying to brag. I know you weren't really available.
No, I'm glad you did well.
But it was basically New York, just the whole planet.
Oh,
you know,
God,
which I'm a New York person, so that was great for me.
It's like New York with billions of people. It's like a New York times a billion.
1 trillion.
Oh my God, I'm never going back. 1 trillion people? That explains why everything involves such a long line. Oh God, we couldn't go anywhere that didn't involve standing in line for 45 minutes. It was terrible. So I was in this cell for 2.5 days, which I think they did to prove a point. Like, they didn't even press charges or anything. They eventually just let me go. So
it's because I talked to them, Heaton, because they get me. I talked to them like a typical New Yorker would. We had it was a heart-to-heart sort of thing. Found out that one of the Jedis, his mother-in-law was from Jersey. Can you believe that? And we got along. We started talking about Jersey. She was actually from South Orange, I think. We went into this whole situation. It was a great time. Really funny guy, Chad. He is just the sweetest fella. We started talking all about everything. I was teasing him because he's a Mets fan, and it was a whole thing, you know. And then I was like, hey, you know what? You also got my buddy. He's locked up here. Any chance that you could just kind of let this thing go away? And it turns out they were going to press charges. They had a lot of stuff against you. Not only did you bring a pocket knife, but you brought some sort of dandruff or something in a bag that looked a lot like something we're not supposed to have. And they didn't even know what it was.
Okay. I can't be bothered having to learn the laws of every planet we go to. That would be a full-time job, all right? So some planets you go to, you can bring stimulants. Some you can't bring stimulants to. And my thing is, I own me. I own my body. My body's not owned by the Empire. It's certainly not owned by a bunch of Jedis enforcing some rule. I bet those Jedis are all doing it themselves back at the Jedi Temple, but they get some kind of, I don't know, they've got like a quota. That's probably the thing, is they got a quota, because they did I got stop and frisk 3 times while I was on Coruscant, where they just walk over and they're like, hey, we're going to check your pockets. And I'm like hell, you're going to check my pockets. Am I being detained? Are you detaining me? Am I being detained? And then they'd say yes.
And then you got detained again, and that was the second time, and you were there for another day. And I had to talk your way out of that one, too.
It was just...
Thank God I was there, or you'd be dead on Coruscant somewhere. And here's the thing. I'm fine with you not learning the rules, but when the rules of that planet are the same rules as our planet, it feels like it should be pretty freaking easy, Heaton. I mean, for God's sakes, man. It's almost the same exact rules.
Maybe I object to some of the rules on my planet, too. I think both of these places, a little bit uptight, in my opinion. There's just, oh God, okay, we're going to take a break for a second from the Jedi and the clear power trip everybody on that planet's on. The flag of Coruscant should be authority figures wagging a finger. That should be their flag. That's what I mentioned that in the jail cell, and all of the green guys thought that was really funny. Which I got to say, like, you know what, people give me flack sometimes for not being very gritty, but I did very well in that jail cell. I made fast friends, and I might even email a couple of those guys if I can remember. You weren't allowed to keep pen and paper in there because you might use it as a weapon. But I remember one of them has a Hotmail email address that I memorized as Greedo452 at hotmail.com. And I was like, well, it's funny that you still got a Hotmail address in this day and age, but all the same.
That is funny, yeah. Hotmail's big on Coruscant.
Yeah, no, it's weird. Yahoo and Hotmail both. And
Bing. They Bing a lot of stuff.
Do you know? Yeah, they do. That was the weirdest thing about Coruscant was that Bing is the predominant search engine, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, if you want to look up something, they say, hey, well, go Bing it, and you're like, still?
Bing it? Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Oh man. I only got to do one night of comedy there. You were there. I think you were headlining the whole week, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did the one night. I liked it.
Yeah,
it was it was the Chuckle Hut in Galactic City, which strikes me as a kind of a standard, like, older comedy club. Probably hit its heyday in the 70s. A lot of velvet, a lot of cigarette stains. They don't allow smoking there anymore, but you can tell they used to. And there's a couple of pictures of Rodney Dangerfield in the back, in the green room, where he clearly looks like he's coked out. So I think that was probably the place to go in the 70s if you were a comedian and you wanted to do some cocaine. I think that's where you'd go. But it was pretty tame when we were there. It was all right. I had a good enough time.
No, I mean, I had a great time. Every one of my shows was really, really great.
Good.
Personally, I felt just overall solid about the experience. Food was pretty good. It's basically what we have here.
It's good, but expensive. It's okay. No problem with the food on Coruscant. The food was delicious. The pizza on Coruscant is outstanding, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, great stuff.
It's so expensive. Do you know how much a sandwich costs?
Yes.
50 credits.
I know, I was there.
50 credits?
Yeah.
That is insane.
Well, you know what? We got paid well. Well, I got paid well because I was there every night.
You were there every night.
You probably only got paid for a night.
Yeah, and that was the other thing, is I threatened to sue them because I was like, I've been here all week. You told me if I came to Coruscant, you were going to pay me all week. You're only paying me for one night, and I was going to go find an attorney, and you taught me out of it, which is probably for the best because I would have wasted even more money on an attorney.
Well, because I saw a Jedi guy just waiting to tackle you, bud, and I just couldn't let that happen again.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Granted, I didn't spend a lot of time in Coruscant proper outside of jail.
True.
But I found it to be just, exhausting. It's so full of people. You're constantly getting just run up against people while you're there. You have to wait in line all the time. And I found the public transit to be very confusing.
Well, I think once you realize it's just a grid.
Oh, yeah, okay, yes.
That's kind of how it works. It's pretty easy once you figure that out, and then you just, as long as you know when you're going up and when you're going down, I think other than that, it's a little tough piecing certain ones together, going from here to here, but I don't know, you kind of get used to it,
I also found the people to be rather brusque. I did not think it was a very friendly place. Most people on Coruscant are mean and brusque and not at all inclined to have conversations with you. And you're not supposed to talk to them on public transit. They get mad. Direct eye contact on Coruscant is an aggressive thing, which I think is ridiculous.
Well, I mean, they're busy. They got stuff to do. They're moving around. They're going. Listen, I got to go to a lot of different restaurants and go to a lot of different. I saw a couple movies while I was there. I was very bored because you were
right. I was in jail.
Detained for most of it, and so I didn't get to kind of hang out with you, and we didn't get to go do the typical things that we do. You and I normally always
see the statue of the Emperor.
We'll always go see the Emperor statue if there's one.
Yeah.
We always try to go to some sort of diner if we can find one.
Right.
These are the things we typically try to do. We also try to take in one of their sport matches.
Yeah.
And I did that. You didn't even get to do it. I was bored. I left halfway through.
I do want to also report the abysmal failure, which was Tinder on Coruscant. I like to, huh?
No, it's fine. I thought you were doing well. You said you had a really promising.
Okay. Yeah, it was promising up till I found out she was a prostitute. Which no problem. Nothing against prostitutes.
Of course,
nothing against prostitutes or sex workers. The problem I had was if you're going to be a sex worker, don't go on Tinder. I feel like you're wasting my time and yours. There are apps for that. Surely on a planet of 1 trillion people, there's got to be some escort services. I have to think that there would be some escort services that you could use, and then that would have been straightforward. But as it was, I went on Tinder, and I'm already just, half the day that I'm not in jail is spent going back and forth with this woman, and we meet up. And I don't know what the etiquette is on Coruscant. Do we split the drinks? I don't know. So I just went ahead and bought them 3 martinis. Guess how much 3 martinis costs?
I didn't drink any martinis, so I don't know off the top of my head. I'd say probably
240 credits.
Holy moly.
240. Right. 200. And that's just
That's
her.
more than I thought. That's more than I thought.
Which also I thought was impolite and improper anyway, because if you're like, if she was clearly not going to do anything with me, or you know, like if this is, you know, if it's not going to turn into a relationship or a one-night stand, maybe just have one drink, right? But then I found out the reason that she was milking this was that the whole thing was just an attempt to get me to pay her for sex, which I'm not going to do. So that was just, it was like, well, now I'm out the money and you're out the time, and like, what a waste for both of us.
How much did you spend on Coruscant?
Probably 1,200.
1,200? Oh, holy hell, Heaton.
Yeah.
That's so much money.
Yeah. Oh man, the only tiny like silver lining there is that they have a, what do you call it, a value-added tax. Yeah. That if you're not from Coruscant, when you leave, when you're at the spaceport, if you bring your receipts with you, they'll reimburse you for the VAT. And so they gave me back like 82 credits. So it's like, you know, I made a little bit of money back, but not when you consider that it was 1,200. It was just not.
Well, they paid you.
Worth it.
How much did you end up getting paid from the comedy club?
150. They gave me 150 per performance.
And you only performed once.
Since I only did one, yeah. So I only made 150. So overall, this was kind of a bust for me. I don't know. I'm not wild to go back, and if I did,
I can't wait. I'm keeping this one on the list. I'm telling you that right now. We're not crossing this one off. I know we've checked off quite a few planets that we don't want to go back to.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm keeping Coruscant on the list.
I'll go back, but I have to be paid well. I'm not going to go back. Here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go back for exposure in a comedy festival. That is too much to ask. But if we're going to we're going to do, a club or something, and we're getting paid well, maybe if there was like a cruise, that would be the ideal. If there were like a cruise that landed there, that would be fine. Then I wouldn't have to deal with any Jedis push me around on some kind of power trip.
Well, it turns out that Mickey owns one of the jazz clubs there, so I could talk to him.
Okay.
Maybe we can get a good spot somewhere around the city. He knows a lot of the other people that own it, you know. It's kind of like a community. So I don't know. Maybe I could talk to him and we can try to figure something out for the next time. And I'll make sure you get paid well.
Thank you.
I promise. And as long as you just kind of get your crap together and don't go all cowboy shit all over the place. And listen, don't get me wrong. I was backing you up. You saw me. I was there the whole time, right? I'm ready to fight for you wherever we go.
Right.
But it was a little much.
All right. Till our next adventure.
And that just about does it. We've approached the event horizon of this episode. Thank you, Erin Macdonald, for taking time away from being an honest-to-God Hollywood sci-fi consultant to come on the show and dish. Thanks, Taylor Stanridge, for audio engineering, and thanks, Alternate Universe Taylor Stanridge, for making an even creepier version of the show in the Mirror Universe. Nick Sperduti, you lovable comedian, thank you for being a buddy and traveling the stars with me. We'll see you next week when we explore Robert